Hello there and welcome back to the studio. Today here we have an 8x10 cotton canvas, and here is an image of the painting that will be created in today's episode. So in today's episode I invite you to get your sketchbook, your oil paints, your acrylic paints, watercolor, gouache, or whatever media you want to work in, and paint along with me. Here is an image of the actual painting that we will be creating a master's study of. This is a Joaquín Sorolla painting. Okay, so you will have that image to the top left corner of your screen. So let's go ahead and get started here. So I'm using a little bit of thinner and the raw umber. Raw umber is going to be my drawing color of choice. So a little more thinner off camera here. So let's suppose the top of the head, I don't know, it's going to fit somewhere around over here. Somewhere over there. So the first step, okay, if you're new to this channel, the first step is almost always the placement of the head onto the canvas or canvas panel or whatever we're working on. So in this case, it's just the placement of the head on the canvas. So I'm thinking of just the top of the head, which I mean, technically it's just the top of the hair, and then the bottom of the chin, though with the facial hair it's kind of hard to distinguish where the chin ends. So this is kind of just my guesstimation. A little bit more thinner. I don't want to have too much thinner on the brush. And if you want to know exactly what materials I'm using, I have links, Amazon affiliate links in the description box down below, as well as the names of all of these oil paints. So if you want to know exactly what colors I'm using, you can feel free to scroll down and I'll have them all typed up for you. So in any painting, whether it's more than, just head and shoulders, in this case what we're going to do is just head and shoulders, but in any painting really it's important to establish the big picture, the big overall composition very early on. And I'm choosing to work on an acrylic tone this time. Last time I toned it with just a thin wash of the oil paint. This time, I don't know. This time I just felt like using acrylic, neutral gray acrylic. But however you want to tone your own canvas is really up to you. Or if you want to work on, a white canvas, that's perfectly fine. So it's simple straight lines and angles. So I'm deciding where the head is going to be placed. I'm thinking here, okay, just standard. I may grow it a little bit, so maybe whereas the chin was there, now I'm going to move it down here. And the main idea right now is freedom, okay? Especially this early in the painting. There are a lot of nerves involved in creating a painting, especially in the start of a painting. We're oftentimes confused at where to even begin. The important thing really is to just get the nerves out of there, just work through the nerves. So the bottom, the collar is going to be over here. So I guess the facial hair is going to go down to here. Simple straight lines and angles. Now it's important, to have a strategy in every painting. Although sometimes it's kind of fun to just jump in there and see what happens. But so for the most part, I'm just working my way towards the block-in stage, which I think we're now getting into. So the block-in just means you're literally blocking in the large forms with simple straight lines and angles. First it was about placement, composition. So composition just means the orientation of all of the elements in your picture, and space, well, meaning, space of the confinements of the canvas. So now with the block-in, you really want to give yourself a chance to figure things out. Just a little axis mark here for the eyebrows, a little mark down here for the nose, and before too soon I'm going to put in the center line very lightly though. The head is in 3/4. The drawing is magnificent. The drawing is really, really nice in this Joaquín Sorolla painting. Remember, this is a master study, okay? Master study, not a master copy. This is a learning exercise with the painting as the end result, okay? So the idea is to continue to sharpen our technique and at the same time observe a masterful painting at the same time, not copying it, okay? Save the copying for the printer or for the camera. Like I always say, if my aim was to create a perfect reproduction of this painting, I would just get a photograph of it and print it right onto the canvas, call it a day. But that's not what I'm after. I tend to think of art as the combination of both intellect and creativity. You kind of want a balance of both. Too much intellect and no creativity is kind of like a block of ice. Too much creativity with no intellect, not even going to go there. So we have the eye sockets, okay? And I tend to think of the main triangle, especially in the block-in stage. So the main triangle is basically the two eyes and the nose. 3 points in space. Connect those 3 points in space and guess what? You have a triangle. So the main triangle is what we are after, and from a from a practical standpoint, trying to get the main triangle as accurate as we possibly can, not necessarily like a photograph, but relatively correct shapes with respect to one another is the way to go. It's oftentimes more difficult, though I tend to do it often, to move one of the eyes. Eyes are quite difficult to move. Nose is a little more difficult to move than, say, the mouth or the chin. But in general, this is your main focus now, right here, okay? Who cares about what's going on over here? This stuff is much easier to move. It's much easier to manipulate, so don't worry about it. Focus on the things that are going to lead to the development of a strong image, okay? Corner of the forehead is over there. All right, so now getting back to the to painting, I'm thinking of the how much information to put in for the eyes. I usually put in I don't know, like a brush stroke or two, so maybe that on its own is okay. So remember the forehead, the hairline to the eyebrows is roughly 1/3, and then the eyebrows to the bottom, or say the root of the nose, is another 1/3. So I think the nose is a little bit too high up. So I'm going to move this down a little bit. And of course you want to relate verticals and horizontals. So here's a horizontal. So the eyebrows appear to be a little bit higher than the ear. So where we have the top of the ear is perfectly fine. The bottom of the nose is almost plumb with the bottom of the earlobe, meaning plumb, meaning they match up. Almost, I mean close enough. So the bottom of the ear, though the ear might be a little bit long, so maybe there, just draw a horizontal, we end up there. So I'm going to use a dry brush, just a dry bristle brush, to push the paint down a little bit. Now the question then becomes, how much information do we want in the block-in? And the answer is really up to you, but I don't think that you want to have a perfectly finished outline in your block-in. Especially with oil paint, what you want to do is have just a few straight lines and angles. If you want to look at Barg drawings, if you want to look at Sargent's, Old Masters, even some of say Sir Anthony Van Dyck, I don't know, Peter Paul Rubens, all of them, they really didn't put that many details or anything like that, any kind of too much minutia in the features. I think that's something that kind of whatever, my English. That's something that kind of, I think, happened with the you know, the idea of trying to create a photographic image, which is not what we're after. So anyway, let's look at the corner of the eye socket here, draw a vertical down. So the nose, we're seeing a little bit more of the side of the nose than I had indicated before. And so if you're curious as to why I chose raw umber as my drawing color, it's just an umber sketch. Remember, I called it umber sketch. So that means I'm going to use some kind of umber, whether it's burnt umber, raw umber, or whatever kind of umber. It's just not very intrusive color, you know. If I were to draw with like cadmium red, that might be a problem. Though we would have some very interesting effects, I'm not going to lie. Okay, so now we're going to work our way down. Actually, I'm going to sit back, and if you're drawing or painting along with me, every time I stand back, it's an open invitation for you to stand back or sit back as well. And I think it is possible to overanalyze things, overthink them with portrait, okay? So I will give you strategies, okay? And then you can go about, you know, applying those strategies however you feel is best. But don't overthink it. Don't overanalyze it. Let it be. Bottom of the nose there. Alright, so the shape of the nose isn't quite right, but what I want to figure out is more or less the placement. Okay, I know it's looking kind of silly right now, but more or less I just want to figure out proper placement for the nose. I think more or less that's about fine. Gonna thin out the paint a little bit more. Alright, so now let's go ahead and start to put in some of the shapes for the hair, facial hair, that is. Now, with the umber sketch, simple straight lines and angles is the way to go, but then also there's the question of, you know, how much information do you need before getting into color, and that's really up to you. I feel like if you have sufficient experience, meaning over a decade with portrait painting, then you can start with color a little bit earlier. If you have under a decade of experience with portrait painting, then probably err on the safe side of spending a little bit more time with your umber sketch. That being said, even if you have a decade or 20, 30 plus years experience, it still won't hurt you to draw a little bit more, okay? So let's go ahead and get the facial hair. And I get this question a lot on Instagram or YouTube of, you know, where to even begin. You know, folks are just getting into portrait painting, just getting into painting. Where to begin? And I think this is it. I mean, these master studies, I really do feel like are very, very useful learning exercises. Okay, you can even do this before attending an atelier. You know, if you're going to attend an atelier or go to an art college or something like that, there's no harm done in testing yourself. Okay, and you know, seeing how you can paint a master study, because what you learn from these master studies you end up taking to your more finished or more personal work. So now with the contour, what I'm doing is with the dry brush. Again, there's no thinner on this, just the dry brush. I'm just using it to push the outline, make it more specific. I'm looking at the angle. Is his head turned? Oh dear. I think his head might be turned. Okay, whatever. We're gonna go in with the outside shape, and if we need to adjust the main triangle, then so be it. Okay, so we're just over the 15-minute mark. So the block-in can take anywhere from, say, I don't know, for me, it can take anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours to do a block-in. Of course, I don't think I will spend the 2 hours on the block-in, but just always know that you should probably take your time with these shapes. I'm kind of rushing through it a little bit because that's just, I don't know, my temperament. I tend to move really quickly through these stages. So now I'm going to put in the dark for the hair. Again, there's a little bit of a thinner application of paint, just so the paint can spread a little more. So I'm going to sit back. Okay, alright, so I think I have a little bit too much of the chin showing down here. So again, let's look at this outline. Now, of course, I have too much of the hair up here, okay? So like I said, not a perfectly finished outline. I'm not after a perfect finish. But I'm trying to have maybe about 80% accuracy, or I don't know, 75% accuracy. So that when I go in with color, you know, with those large planes of color, I will be able to create a more specific outline using them. And the idea of constructing with straight lines and angles in a two-dimensional sense is extended into a more three-dimensional sense when we get into planes of color. And if you're new to this channel, okay, and you're like, oh my goodness, he talks so much, I tend to slow down with my talking when I get more focused. So I don't know, somewhere after the 1 hour point or whatever, I'm going to end up, you know, not talking as much. So I said this is a paint along, okay, tutorial style paint along video. This is designed for you to, you know, keep my voice somewhere in the back of the studio, wherever you're working or at home. So now the shapes are starting to get a little bit more specific. I'm looking at the distance from that corner to that corner. I'm guessing I can push this back a little bit more. And notice how I keep relating everything to the main triangle. Alright, so I think that... Okay, I'm going to stand back for a second. Okay, alright, so I think for the the facial hair, I'm going to want to move this shape up. So we're almost there, almost at the point where I feel comfortable enough to jump in with color. How about we throw in this this dark element here with the umber sketch? Of course, I'm doing this without a straight edge, but oh well. This might actually help me kind of place things. Okay, alright, so let's just sketch this in. I'm going to thin out the paint a little bit more. So after putting this in, I see that I can adjust the corner of the eye a little bit. There. So we're going to thin out the paint a little bit more. Okay, alright, so now I think we're just about ready to start getting into color. Alright, so I switched brushes here, so a little bit of yellow ochre, some of the white, the mixing white, burnt sienna, a little more burnt sienna, cadmium red. So, okay, pick a plane, any plane. I think top plane for the nose. So again, like I've been saying before, this is one of my favorite bristle brushes of all time. Again, link in the description. Robert Simmons bristle brushes. These brushes have been lasting forever, and I'm not paid to say this, so you know I'm telling you the real deal here. So I'm not paid to say this, and what I'm going to say is these brushes have been amazing. They've been through so much studio work. I've been painting non-stop studio paintings, trying to get ready for a one-man show, and who knows what gallery, whatever gallery will accept me. Some lucky day that I get to show in a gallery. But anyway, these brushes have been through so much, and they're just now starting to die. So speaking of the death of the bristle brush, the death of a really good bristle brush, what's happening is the bristles, see here, the bristles are just starting to fall apart. I guess there's like a brush sharpener I've seen in the store or something like that I could use. But I think it's about time to start getting some new brushes. I think I'm going to stick with these Robert Simmons. Now from the painting standpoint, what I'm looking for are basic planes, okay? So the planes that are facing the light the most, as you know, are going to receive more light. The planes that are facing the light a little bit less are going to be darker. And the areas that have local darker values are going to just be darker, even though they're facing the light quite a bit, like, you know, the facial hair. A little more burnt sienna. So I'm going for these main planes on the top of the head. I usually tend to start kind of in this area. I don't know why. I can't really tell you why that is. It's just how I've been starting these days. So a little more alizarin for the bulb of the nose. See how we're starting to make the outlines a little bit more specific. So a little bit more of the alizarin, cadmium red. Naples yellow, titanium white. That's a really bright plane. Let's make this a little bit cooler. Sap green, Naples yellow. A little bit lighter shape there. A little more burnt sienna, cadmium red. More alizarin. It's going to start to get darker as we approach the hairline. So tell you what, this brush is now going to be deemed the halftone brush. So a little more raw umber. And now I'm going to switch into a different brush. So this is a different brush. Same Robert Simmons. Although this one is a little bit less beat up. I don't know why. Maybe I messed up when I was cleaning it. But on top of the fact that, you know, I really like these brushes, I guess that's ambiguous to say. What I like about them is they last forever. They're very soft for bristle brushes. You know, they're soft, yet they can carry quite a lot of paint. Okay, soft, yet they can carry quite a lot of paint. They clean very easily. And they just last forever. Okay, alright, so I'm going to switch to the halftone brush. A little more alizarin. So we're putting in the dark plane underneath of the eye. Let's go ahead and put that shape in the other side. A little more green. A little more sap green. Raw umber. Okay. Naples yellow. Sap green. Titanium white. Okay, all right, so with the same light brush, we're going to go down a little bit in value. So like I was saying earlier, it's really a good idea to have a strategy. So my strategy now that I've shifted past the block-in stage, now I'm in the large plane stage. Meaning I'm looking at large planes. There's no hard fast rule, okay, how to go about it. I'm just, you know, telling you what's what I've been doing lately. This is how I approach even my studio paintings. Or if you follow me on Instagram, you can see, you know, the posts that I make. You can see the stages in between, large plane stages, and then after this is going to be the small planes, and then we just finish it from there. Alright, so I'm going to switch to halftone brush. A little more burnt sienna. Okay. Here's this darker plane. And let's throw in a little more Naples yellow. Sap. Beautiful colors to mix, if you would ask me. Okay, so we're going to go a little bit darker. And that's as dark as I'm going to want to go with the light brush. So now let's get a little bit of the alizarin permanent. Mixing white. So that's going to be the maxilla region on the side of the nose. Okay, so now the wing of the nose I've been kind of neglecting. So let me first, where's my brush? Dark brush. Okay, so this is the drawing brush that we had earlier. Raw umber, cadmium red, just that. So raw umber, cadmium red. I want to get this dark accent for the nose. And I think this is a perfectly valid way to get into painting. It may be a little bit daunting at first to learn all of the mixtures. You know, if you're confused about flesh tone mixtures and the different variation of flesh tone mixtures, I have a video for that. I posted that a couple Wednesdays ago. A little bit more light. There we go. Now we're starting to get some light for the wing of the nose, though that looks a little bit strange. So let's get a little more Naples yellow. And I think what's happening is this is a little too large of a brush for this shape. But I'm trying to use the largest brush as possible to get the job done, just to kind of minimize the amount of brush strokes that I need to apply for a particular area. The nose is just all wrong, so let's get a little more of the alizarin. What was I doing? Okay, for the wing of the nose, the bulb of the nose, sorry. I'm just trying to move the nose a little more this way. It was turning a little too much. But I'm not going to worry too much about specifics just yet. So more Naples yellow and sap, titanium white. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the drawing brush, add a little bit of the sap. I'm going to establish this contour. I'm going to end up putting too much paint on this side, but my idea is to come back in and carve into it. Oh dear. Okay, so different brush. I'm actually going to have to use a smaller brush for this. There. I meant to use this brush as the indication for the small planes stage, which we're not in yet, but the nose was in trouble, so I might still be in trouble, but trying to do the best that I can to rectify or minimize the damage. Like I said, main triangle, main triangle. So as long as these shapes are as accurate as I can get them, then we're in good shape. No pun intended. Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to go back to that mixture that I originally had before. Put in these light shapes. Okay. Alright, so now we're going to move down in value a little bit. Burnt sienna, alizarin crimson. And that is for the cheekbone. Cool. Alright, so now a little bit more burnt sienna, yellow ochre, which are two very beautiful colors to mix as well. Burnt sienna and yellow ochre. Mixing white. Was that too much mixing white? Yeah, probably was. So Naples yellow, sap green. Why am I using Naples yellow and sap green? I don't know. Maybe just because I like the way that they mix together. Naples yellow. And notice there is a lot of paint on the brush. Well, maybe you can't really see because, you know, camera quality. But there is a lot of paint on the brush. Not using any extra medium at all. No extra medium whatsoever. And that's really one of the ways to get the most out of your colors with oil paint. No matter what the brand is, just try to minimize the amount of medium that you use. Medium is to do a specific alteration to the oil paint. You know, usually it can help to speed or to slow down drying rates, but also to thin out the paint. And thinning is what I don't want right now. I want the most paint possible. Definitely painting with a loaded brush here. I should be switching into the halftone brush, so let me do that as we are working in the halftones, aren't we? So this is the side plane. Okay. And it's going to get a little more greenish, so we're going to throw in a little more of the sap into the side planes over here. And a little bit lighter here, yet still darker than, say, that. Ideally, unless I mess that up. Okay, alright, so now we're starting to get somewhere. A little bit darker. A little more sap green. I really enjoy the way that Joaquín Sorolla simplified this side plane, this halftone, for the side of the eye socket. It's almost a non-existent blur, which is one of my favorite things to observe. Okay, alright, so it's going to get a little bit lighter here than this plane. So let me go ahead and put in the dark for the cheekbone first. A little more red, a little more cadmium red, alizarin. And notice how we have formed the color value web. In the past, I would mix up the color value web first. These days I'm just attacking the mixtures, and then I end up with the color value web. Whichever way you want to do it, it's just important to organize your values, lightest to darkest, maybe warm to cool, or however you want to adjust them. But vertically I tend to adjust with value. Horizontally I tend to adjust color. A little bit more Naples yellow. And this is just fun. I mean, using more paint, letting the brush strokes be wild and free like this is really fun. It's a really liberating way to work. A little more burnt sienna. Okay, all right, so I'm going to let this shape go down a little bit more. So we're going to go down in value. So raw umber and the alizarin. So we're letting it get a little bit darker. And you know what? We can even use that over here. A little bit more light here for where the chin, I'm supposing, would be. A little bit more of the cadmium red for the lip. I'm assuming where the lip will eventually be. A little more sap, raw umber, alizarin, ultramarine blue, that is. Alright, so I'm going to add a little bit more alizarin, and we're going to start to put in these dark, warmer shapes for the ear. Helix, anti-helix going on around here. A little more alizarin, ultra. Alright, going to switch brushes now to the light brush. A little bit more of the cadmium red. What did I call this? What is this? Naples yellow. So the earlobe is, I think, the brightest right over there, and then everything kind of starts to get a little bit darker around here and then lighter up here. So I tend to go for the lights first. When we're talking about the middle tones, so since we are in the middle tones, okay. All right, so now I'm going to put in the darker middle tones. What am I doing? I should be using the halftone brush since they are darker halftones. And this is one of the ways you can find form with freedom. That's one of the Nelson Shanks quotes. Remember, Nelson Shanks is one of my favorite painters of all time. And finding form with freedom is essentially what we're after, If you're able to find form with freedom, if you're able not to overthink it all the time, but at the same time have, an understanding of form, value, structure, proportion, anatomy, and all that stuff, it's just a lot of fun, going into the studio every day, or whenever we can go into the studio and just enjoy the process and still create visually compelling works at the same time. It's a wonderful place to be. A little bit darker for the corner of the ear there. I'm going to stand back. Okay. All right, so now I think what I'm going to do is get a larger brush. Titanium white, raw umber, no extra medium. So let's try titanium white and raw umber. And that's pretty close, maybe a tiny bit of ultra. And I'm going to carve out the shape for the hair. And while I'm doing this, I should probably mix up the tone for the hair. Where's my brush? Hold on, I have to find a brush. Okay, so this is a bit too large of a brush, but whatever. So we're going to use the raw umber, ivory black, burnt sienna just because, a little bit of sap green. Okay, alright, so now we're going to put in a, whoop, too green. So alizarin. Just to add a little bit more nuance to the color, a little bit more flavor to the color, as opposed to just automatically going for like ivory black and, you know, calling it a day. It can be kind of boring if the colors are too, you know, generic and basic. So I'm putting in the dark shape for the hair, using the brush at the same time to soften the edges around the hairline. Remember, the hairline should have the softest edges of all. If the edges are not soft for the hairline, the hair starts to look a little bit out of place. Okay. Alright, so while I have the color for the hair, I'm going to use the halftone brush. And for hair, I tend to use halftones to indicate the lights. Now just simple shapes of light and dark. I'm going to try not to spend even more than a minute on the light for the hair. Just because, you know, that's not as important as getting the big shapes. A little bit more of the raw umber, ivory black. So if you're hearing any noise in the background, I'm sorry about that, but there's really nothing I can do about it. So a little bit more. So the raw umber. I tend to also get very distracted when I hear noises around the studio. I don't know if you feel the same way when you're working. So a little bit more raw umber. Eventually, I'll get my own studio somewhere. I have faith in myself. If no one else does, I do. And that's how we should live life. Be confident in your own ability. Don't try to seek comfort or confidence from someone else. That should come from within you. But anyway, since I'm painting in the background, it usually means story time, but I guess it means pep talk today. Okay, alright, so now that I have this brush with the kind of neutral tone of the background, I'm going to add a little bit more of the ultra ivory black. Another thing I do for the background noise when I'm working is I wear noise canceling headphones, which actually ends up helping me a lot. The noise cancelling headphones, I should probably make an affiliate link for them, but they really help to cancel out noises you don't want to listen to when you're working or when you're in the gym or whatever. But anyway, what am I doing? The ultramarine blue, ivory black, raw umber, mixing white. Just trying to fill in this kind of gray color. Okay, so now I'm going to get a different brush. I'm gonna run out of brushes soon. So titanium white, I'm actually gonna run out of space. So titanium white, raw umber again, just a little bit of raw umber just so we're not using straight up titanium white. I'm gonna stand back for a second. All right, so I stood back and realized I didn't turn off the autofocus. So the autofocus is now off. So hopefully it doesn't go in and out of focus. I'm sorry if it was doing that, but you know, doing the best that I can. So now we're starting to put in this large light shape for the collar. And then while I still have the dark brush for the hair up here, we're going to use it over there. And then how about we transition into smaller shapes? You know, I usually write, I usually say like question of the day or things like that. I'm sorry, I've been kind of neglecting that the past couple of videos. But someone said something that really aggravated me a couple of days ago when I was at a friend's birthday thing. And it got me wondering, what are some of the things that people say to you? I'm speaking to you as artists, okay? What are some of the things that people say to you as an artist that upsets you? I mean, for me, it was like someone was like, "Hey, are you selling your paintings for thousands of dollars now?" Like, I'm like, no, no, I'm not. They're like, "Oh, are you selling your paintings for hundreds?" And then in my head, I just want to like grab my the noodles. It was at a restaurant, so I wanted to grab the noodles and throw it at this person, but of course I didn't. And like I usually say, you know, if somebody bullies you or picks on you or something like that, the right thing to do is to feel sorry for them. You know that it's poison, it's venom when people are trying to bring others down to make themselves feel better. It's just useless. It's sad that some people spend their lives, you know, portraying such behavior to elevate themselves or to make themselves feel better. It's just really sad. But anyway, I mean, this is story time, right? Because I'm filling in all of the background stuff. You know, I'm allowed to talk about stuff like this. I give myself the freedom to talk about stuff like that when I'm filling in the background and stuff. I consider this stuff to be background stuff. But anyway, in the comments, what are some of the things that people say to you that really aggravate you? And then what do you do about it? Do you punch them out, or what do you do? Not that I encourage such behavior. I tend to just, you know, try to sympathize with someone, you know, when they're trying to bring me down, and I feel bad for them. I really do. I wish the best for everyone, even those that really despise me for some reason. Alright, so a little bit more of the alizarin and ivory black for the background. Okay, alright, so I think that's alright for the background. Now let's get into the facial hair. Is this the brush that I used for the hair? Yeah, looks like it is. So a little bit more raw umber. And now we're going to start to put in some of these dark shapes for the hair. Remember, we're working big shapes to smaller shapes. Okay. Corner of the side of the facial hair there. And I'm going to let it blend in with the flesh tone. Actually, before that, let me get the halftone brush there should be a little bit of halftone here. And then while we're doing that, I do think the earlobe needs to go down a little bit. The nose might have to move as a result, but oh well. So earlobe down. So the alizarin. Okay. Alright, so now returning to the facial hair, I'm gonna let the flesh tone kind of blend in with this brush, the color on this brush, to try to get a lighter shape. Might not be the best way, but whatever. I'm gonna try this out first. Okay. Simple and easy. Not sure what's going on there, so you know what I always say, when in doubt, blur it out. So I'm going to keep it really soft down here. Okay, so now I think we can start to get into the smaller shapes. Now I'm just going to get smaller brushes. Alright, so a little bit more of the sap green to the middle tone region of the palette. Nope, never mind. I'm going to get the drawing brush. Put this shape in first. Okay, now I'm going to put that color I mixed up earlier. Okay. Alright, so that is for the light. The top plane of the lower eyelid, which of course I messed up. So I'm going to adjust that shape promptly. And like I said in the beginning of the episode, I tend to not talk as much in the times where I'm more focused. I think we're heading towards that kind of focus now. So again, what I'm trying to do with this smaller shape is start to add a little more specificity. And notice how I tend to start off with the main triangle, especially in the smaller plane stage. Okay, so now we're in the smaller plane stage. I need a smaller brush. Hold on a second. Where's my brush? Okay, found the brush. Okay, so let's just use this color. Okay, so now we have a little bit of light for the... Ooh, that looks pretty neat. But now that I'm looking at my screen, I think that I could raise the light sensitivity a little bit. Okay, is that a little better? I think it is. So now that we're getting into the more subtle notes, more subtle tones, I think it was only right to raise the light sensitivity on the camera. So this is probably, I don't know which self-portrait this is. Obviously I know it's Joaquín Sorolla, but we've done quite a bit of self-portraits with these master studies, and they're always very serious. Like, remember the one we did of Anders Zorn? Very, very serious. And we're getting that kind of serious look in this one too, which is kind of neat. And always remember, especially even with these smaller shapes, less is more. As long as the less that you put in has more thought to it. Less is sometimes still less if we don't put more thought into it. So there's a lot of thinking going on in my head. That's why I'm not really talking as much. Plus, it doesn't make sense to talk for, like, you know, over an hour or whatever, however long this video will be. It does make sense to slow down and just let you watch and paint along or draw with me. Okay, so I have the shape that I want for that area, but not, I'm sorry, I have the color, but not the shape. So let's get the shape. So this is how we're going to be, you know, steering the painting towards more specificity. Okay. A little bit more light. Whoops. And, oh yes, so no extra mineral spirits, okay? Or anything like that. Even though I was kind of deceiving you for a while, I didn't mention what type of oil paints I was using, and that was deliberate. So notice how in the beginning I didn't say that I was using the water mixable oil paints. I just wanted to see how long it would take for you to figure out that I was using water mixable. Or what I like to call water cleanable these days, because I don't really think it's a good idea to mix it with water too much. though of course you can, and it works just fine. But when you use less water or less medium, the water mixables basically handle just like traditional oil paints. They're nearly indistinguishable when you use them in this way. But in any case, no extra medium or thinner. Okay, so and if you're following me on Instagram, I've done the same thing. I've been purposefully kind of tricking you into thinking that I'm using traditional oil paints. The last, I don't know, 10 posts, I think, have been with water mixable, including the studio paintings, the figurative ones. They have been with water mixable. I just wanted to see if anyone would notice, and I don't think anyone noticed, which is a good thing. I want to be one of the, I guess, pioneers of this kind of material. It is a new material, relatively new, water mixable oil paints, but they're still oil paints essentially. Just chemically altered a little bit to clean with water. And no, I'm not using them for health reasons or anything like that, though I probably guess I should since I don't have windows. But I'm using the water mixable just because, you know, I just want to experiment. A little bit more raw umber, sap. And yeah, I'm just trying to put a more specific contour to the outside of the head. I am thinking of making a video, you know, strictly dedicated to water mixable handling, water mixable oil paint handling, though I'm giving myself more time to master the material before, you know, I make a video about it. So if you're wondering if water mixable oil paints can handle just like traditional oil paints, they can. They certainly can. So long as you do not use too much thinner, too much medium. And by thinner, earlier I said I was using thinner to thin out the paint, and what I was using was the Artisan thinner made by Winsor & Newton, Artisan water mixable thinner. And the reason I chose to use that instead of water to thin out the paint is just that I think, I have no data to back this up, but I think that it's just better for the overall texture of the paint if you avoid the water for the drawing. And by texture, I mean literally the buildup of paint. Okay, my my earlier videos featuring the water mixables where I just used water, those paintings are more flat when it comes to texture. It affects the appearance of the painting almost none, but just the layering of the oil paint, I think that it's better to just use little to no water. now we're starting to get some more specificity onto this area, the main triangle. So right now I'm just trying to put in some of the more subtle tones, and this is definitely very subtle, the side plane of the nose. And to obtain subtlety, you really have to ask yourself, how close can I get these values to one another, yet maintain their variation from one another? You know, how close can I get this tone to say, how close can I get this tone to say this tone here, yet maintain their differentiation from one another? That's how you obtain subtlety. So now that we differentiated this plane from this plane, I now think that this one can still get a little bit lighter. Some more titanium white, cadmium red. A lot of paint. Okay, so now I'm running into a little trouble, so I need to adjust this shape. I'm gonna stand back. It's a little better. So what's causing me some difficulty is the accent for the nose there. So I'm going to paint it out first and paint a little bit of a gradation that's lighter. There. gonna get the darker brush, or the brush with the darker color. Gonna stand back. All right, so after standing back, I think that I could actually have a little more for his forehead. So we're gonna get the larger brush, larger light flesh tone brush. We're just going to push the hairline up. All right, I'm going to stand back. Okay, so I'm going to use a clean and dry synthetic brush to keep pushing the hairline up and at the same time soften the edge. Now the hairline, or at least now we're getting a sense of the hair turning back in space, or I guess resting on his head. Okay, all right. So now, speaking of facial hair, I think we can do a little bit more for the facial hair over here. So I'm moving on to all of these shapes only after working a little bit, or I guess a lot, on the main triangle, and I'm still not quite satisfied with the main triangle yet. And again, I'm sorry if you're hearing the background noise. No one really cares when I'm filming here, so that's just the way it is. So a little bit darker and warmer. The bulb of the nose. Okay, so I think I'm missing the highlight for the nose. Titanium white. And the Naples yellow. Okay. All right, so now I'm just going to adjust the contour. A little bit more titanium white. Naples yellow. Okay, so now where was I? So for the facial hair, I'm trying to apply the brush strokes in this direction just to minimize the glare. then something interesting happens. It gets a little bit darker when we transition to the hair on his head instead of the facial hair. Going to use the clean and dry synthetic brush once I can find it. Again, trying to minimize glare as much as possible. And now we're going to soften with the same brush. Same thing over here. Okay. All right, so I think that I can have a little more of a kind of a crease for the glabella. There. Okay, so now I'm going to stand back. Okay, so I think that I should probably cover the canvas that's still showing over here. I'm going to stand back again. Okay, so now with the same brush, we're going to go back in and put a little more specificity for the facial hair. Ivory black, alizarin, a little more ivory black. Okay, so we're going to switch to the light brush. Maybe not. Let me get a different brush. Where's my brush? Okay, got a different brush. So I'm going to move the upper lip up. As I said earlier, the main triangle is really where you want to spend your most effort. And then now that we are moving the lip up, I think that just goes to show that, it's just easier on a practical note to transition from here to all around here. Okay, We're going to adjust this contour as well. So remember in the umber sketch, I said, you know, I wanted to get maybe like 90, or not 90, like 80% or 75% or whatever accuracy with the umber sketch, and that I would correct the rest with the color. And this is what I meant, really. Now that we're going in and starting to add much more refinement to the shapes, we're able to do that with color, as opposed to trying to overcalculate everything with the lines and then filling in the color. Which of course, you know, I've done paintings where I did like pencil drawings and transfer them and things like that. It's perfectly fine. It's just I think that this is a little faster and a little more freeing. A little bit more of the cadmium red. Clean and dry synthetic brush. Now the idea is to go back in with a single brush stroke, you know, for the side plane of the face, but I'm kind of having trouble managing my brushes. I have a lot of brushes, so let's just use this one. And this is just to delineate the plane that's turning completely away from the light over there. And now the difficulty is going to be coming back in with a single brush stroke to delineate this shape. And why it's going to be difficult is just because I'm pretty sure it's going to glare. I could be wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong. I was right, of course. Not that I'm always right. I'm usually not always right, but yeah, glare. Okay. Alright, so after adjusting that, I'm going to have to swap out a battery. Okay, so after swapping out a battery, I think I'm pretty satisfied with this painting the way it is as a master study. I usually don't, do that. I usually tend to try to work the painting much longer than the amount of time that I have been painting this. But I think I'm pretty satisfied with it. Like I said, this is not intended to be an exact copy. It's not intended to be a master study. This is a painting exercise with an oil painting. It's a learning exercise, sorry, with an oil painting as the end result. Or in your case, if you're doing a drawing, pencil drawing, charcoal drawing, acrylic, or whichever. And if you want to share your artwork with the Yupari artist community, or just share your artwork with me, I have my Instagram accounts. I have the Facebook page where you can post pictures of your work. So you can see also what others have done with these master studies. So again, pretty much satisfied with the way that the painting has turned out. What I'm doing is just softening edges here and there, trying to eliminate glare. Hold on. Let me turn off the autofocus for you. There we go. Alright, autofocus is turned off. Alright, softening some shapes. But anyway, I think that this is a really good learning exercise, okay? It doesn't have to be a perfect replica of the Joaquín Sorolla. And if you've never seen Sorolla's work, definitely check it out, okay? This image, you can find a really, really nice image of this painting in the Google Arts page or website. You just Google Arts and Culture, and then on their search tab, just look up Joaquín Sorolla, and this will show up very, very quickly. Okay, so I'm going to stand back again, and I think we're pretty much in good shape. Okay, I did simplify this much more, than my usual portrait painting demonstrations, but again, I want this to be more of a paint-along style, paint-along approach. Every single brushstroke has been filmed for you to watch, rewatch it as many times as you would like, and draw or paint along with me. It doesn't have to be at the same pace. You can move faster than me, or you can move slower than me. Remember, YouTube has the option of turning this into a faster video, a time-lapse video, though I've never done that, but people tell me that you can actually make the video a time-lapse if you want to see it faster. But I think doing the demo and talking to you in real time, I think, is a little more informative, if you ask me. Softening one last edge there. All right, that being said, if you want to support this channel even more, I have a Patreon account. And remember, if you have joined my Patreon this week, remember this is a Wednesday video. The Patreon shoutouts will be given out at the end of each Saturday episode, okay? So I will give out the shoutouts for the new patrons on Saturday. That being said, always remember, in a world that can be so negative, be the spark that ignites positivity among all of us. I truly hope that today's episode helps you out. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and I'll see you again on the next episode.